In this long-term plan, I'm supporting the move to standardise the inorganic collection around the city. It will now require people to book an on-property collection. An annual activity, this will be paid for by the targeted rate. And I'm pleased to see the type of feedback we got for that. I also want to make sure we continue to support the very important retrofit program to keep our homes warm and healthy. I'm allowing up to $9 million per annum in grants for this program. Governance and support, a big chunk of our costs is keeping this organisation running, and we challenge the Chief Exec to find $36 million of savings or additional revenue. And he's risen to the challenge. There will be no change to this budget, except for two specific items. I want to support the Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Reserves Board, as well as the Parakai Reserves Board. Two small but significant budgets to those two communities. And on the education front, Comet. I'm proposing they receive an increase of $235,000 to their operating budget to at the least keep them sustainable. Parks, Community and Lifestyle is a group of activities that is closest to our heart and what we've heard a lot on. One that we spent many hours discussing and debating with our local board representatives and communities. We did ask for the organisation to prioritise some of its activities. In doing so, this resulted in some service level changes. But I want to remind Aucklanders that, as promised, we're not going to shut a single pool, recreation centre or library. In fact, we're opening them. In the past 4 years, we have invested $63 million in building new libraries and refurbishing existing ones. I personally, and you all, will be at the opening of 6 libraries by the end of this year, in the first 5 years of this council's existence. 6 libraries. Council has suggested an alternative to shortening some library hours, as was proposed, and what was not supported, even against the backdrop of all this massive investment in libraries. Cost savings could be made within the current transfer of books across the city. And I'm happy for elected members to explore this, and if they think this may be more acceptable to the community, propose it. So I look forward to recommendations on that front. Overall, the capital program in this area has not been cut back over the 10-year period, but it has been increased slightly from $2.1 billion to $2.2 billion. So we're holding the line, but not reducing. We have standardised service levels across the region. This makes sense to me. It's the fairest way, but we have listened to local boards and given them the flexibility to use their discretionary spending to raise those levels if they wish. We did have some further requests for funding, but I'm happy to accommodate these, as including an extra $1.9 million over 4 years for Surf Life-Saving Northern Region. An additional $350,000 to increase the regional grants budget. Where is he? $1 million for WW1 Memorials, $600 million capital spend and $400 million in operational.
400,000.
400,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Cam. That was a Freudian slip. It was a hope. Weed control was also a hotly debated topic, and I am happy with taking the standardised approach for cost savings, but local boards and their communities can locally fund alternatives if they wish. Emergency Housing and Homelessness Councillors, this is a lead from me, and it is a matter that I and Councillor Casey have been working on in particular over the 5 years of this United Council, and we have not taken a specific lead on it, but I propose to do so in a way that I hope you will support. It's an area of clear concern, the issue of homelessness and emergency housing. We know that in the city streets alone, without even reference to Henderson, to Papatoetoe, to parts of the North Shore, we have 156 people who are rough sleepers. And we know the work that goes on in support of them, particularly from City Mission, LifeWise et al. I've observed this discussed it, sat around meetings for the last 5 years and talked about it, and I'm sick of doing that. It is time for some action. Because of that, I'm proposing a new round of funding to help address the city's shortage of emergency housing and to make sure that those who are rough sleeping are accessing the services they need. This is obviously not being done in a vacuum. It is a matter that requires strong government support, and I am asking and will continue to ask for that. But secondly, we can't do it without those who are active on the coalface. The proposal is to include $250,000 a year for 2 years to assist emergency housing providers and $110,000 per year for 3 years for organisations like the City Mission to support their vital work. As I've said, it's important to note here that this needs to be a collaborative approach between central, local government and NGOs. It is well recognised that emergency housing shortage in Auckland, we are short of 500 houses. We are not proposing that we should build the houses. What we are proposing is that it would generate new space in a variety of ways, such as offsetting regulatory costs or aiding and planning professional fees associated with new space, perhaps in assisting in start-up costs for particularly innovative proposals. You will see in briefing, and we will discuss in the days and weeks and months ahead, the work that Salvation Army, Vision West and City Mission are doing in this space and where we can work with the government. It is not a lot of money, councillors, but I ask you to support this as the beginning of a way forward where we can leverage our influence to assist in the work that is critical to be done here. If we do not make the change in homelessness now, we will never be able to do it. And we've been planning this for the last 3, 4 or 5 years. I want to acknowledge Councillor Kathy Casey's leadership in this space. Our water care providers had indicated increases in water and wastewater prices up to 4%. We were not happy with that. I certainly was not. They responded with a more prudent budget, resulting in 2.5% increase in this year and a 3.6% increase in the years after that. I'm happy with that, and you'll see no change to that budget. Local board discretionary capex. Man, we've worked hard in this space. So we addressed the operational issues for the local boards 18 months ago, and I think that was a very successful outcome. And we listened to the boards at the beginning of this process, and in the initial budget increased our proposal 1% to enable an LDI fund to the local boards. This proposal does not compromise that money at all. We did this partially with LDI, but I now want to add to that. Well, I'm firmly of the belief that major asset decisions need to be left with us. We need to manage debt in the face of conflicting priorities and maintain a regional perspective, but I agree some discretion should be with the local boards to respond to the needs of their communities. With that in mind, among other things, I'm recommending more flexibility and increase in the legacy fund for local boards from $4 million per year to $30 million in a 3-year package, $10 million a year. Māori transformational shift. I'm also pleased to see that staff have made progress in identifying how much of our council budget contributes to Māori wellbeing. So far, $186 million over 10 years has been identified. This includes $80 million for co-governance entity. Various fees and charges. Currently, revenue from rates forms 43% of our total revenue base, but I want to keep reducing our reliance on rates. We've had an in-depth discussion with other fees and charges for services across the region, and where my thinking has ended up is about fairness and about standardisation, not harmonisation. For street traders, I am proposing a standardised administration fee, and this will be capped at $500 per annum for those who have not had these charges previously. An exception will be made for seasonal street traders. I'm sticking to the plan for a standardised fee for burial and cremation services, a sensitive topic, but one that I try and apply fairness to. This affects the Gulf Islands the most, but unlike refuse charges, I feel interment charges should be the same for everyone. I've listened very hard to the concerns of the elderly. I believe we've set the rents at about the right level, but I think we need to take the transition seriously. Therefore, I'm proposing increases and decreases now be applied at a slower rate. No more than $5 per week every 6 months. A little bit of give and take here, councillors. Again, the same for solid waste charges. These will be standardised across the region. Development contributions. Now, this is a hugely important one. We know why. Because we don't want existing ratepayers to be necessarily overly subsidising our growth. It's clear from consultation that we need to tweak aspects of our development contribution policy, and we are. We've done this, and you will see that one of the major drivers was to make sure local communities see the direct benefits from those developments on our doorstep. So, for example, in particular around transport, subdividing Auckland up into 4 zones. Much better connectedness. Rating policy. The rating policy, as always, has generated significant feedback, and I am always concerned with how we use the tools we have available to make sure they are as affordable as possible to people in different financial circumstances. We all know rates are a blunt tool that take no account of individual circumstances, but having said that, there is a high correlation between property value and income level, and that has guided much of my thinking. Some of the key features of rating policy include to keep the UAGC at 385. Very, very clear message from the community. And particularly in light of the proposed transport levy, which is, as a flat fee, regressive. A slowdown in the reduction of the business differential to minimise the impact to residential ratepayers. The reduction to 25.8 of rates from business will now be achieved in 2036-37. We have to listen to the community in its broader sense. Māngere Otahu Local Board requested a higher targeted rate to be able to offer free swimming pool entry for adults. I support that. And I've directed staff to explore further tools we have available for those on fixed income with escalating property values who may struggle to meet a rates increase. Covered a lot today, but it's a very, very big budget, and we have consulted on a lot. Councillors, what I've tried to do is respond in particular with balance, respond to some clear messages from Aucklanders, recognise that it is time for us to act in transport in particular, but also be fair across the region. I hope I've struck that balance right, and we will debate the elements of this proposal and our budget over the next 2 weeks and conclude on the 7th and 8th. Today, councillors, is an opportunity merely to receive this proposal and look forward to the substantive debate in the next 2 weeks. So I ask for a seconder I move the receipt of this proposal and ask for a seconder, please. Councillor Penny H, second. Right, councillors, open for your reflections. Councillor Camp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm relatively encouraged by this document, and it's particularly pleasing to see the resetting of the rates base back to 2.5%. And I appreciate that the organisation has dug deep in recent weeks around further organisational savings, looking at interest savings and the likes, and that is one thing that some of us called for, was if we could get the regional rates average back to 2.5, that would be great. And also if we could fix our transport targeted rate rather than have it variable based on valuation. And so that is really encouraging too. And also the fact that you've put a good differential in there albeit certainly one that can be easily stomached by many in the business community, as far as $99 versus $159. Some of us would have liked to have seen a much higher UAGC, as you have known in your 20 years in local government, Mr Mayor. But I do appreciate that that this is partly offset and mitigated by the fact that you're going for a fixed transport targeted rate. I suppose my comments would be that transport targeted rate, and it is going to yield from your forecast and the office's 500 million, well, it's going to be able to service 500 million in debt. I'd certainly like to make sure that goes on big intergenerational economic driver stuff. Some of the projects that have been put forward as far as for targeted rates or for toll revenue, I believe should not be part of that take, and I'm talking things like beautification of Quay Street, upgrading seawalls and that. Let's put that 500 million debt into big generational stuff. And I'd also like to see what impact that has, when we're now servicing that debt through a targeted rate, what impact that will have on our debt limits, given that you've quite wisely pulled them in by 20% from 13 billion down to about 10 billion. The business differential, it'd be interesting to now see from the business community, and they really need to get us their feedback quickly, as to stretching out the narrowing of the differential to 2036, 37. I note, Mr Mayor, that you'll be about 80 years of age at that point, but I also note, Mr Mayor, that Sir Dovemeyer Robinson was 80 years of age when he spent his final year in the Mayoralty. So there you go. I think it was actually under the Fletcher administration when this business differential came in from the Auckland City point of view. I know Tony Garnier and I and others in John Banks's office tried to claim it was us, but it was actually Christine's team, and the target has, I think it might have been a 10-year target over that time.
Yeah, it was.
We're now looking at kind of the year 2000 to the year 36 is quite a stretch, and we really need some feedback on that. My suggestion earlier on was that perhaps they'd be prepared, business that is, commercial ratepayers, to pay a bit more as a transport targeted rate if we're able to commit to the 2025, 26 target for the business differential narrowing. And so that debate, I'd really welcome some feedback from the business community on that one, because they have been patient, as I said, for 15 years now. The asset optimisation, I'm pleased that Councillor Cooper's push for that to come up has been covered off on page 6. Yep. But I'd really like to hope, Mr Mayor, that while we talk about that great euphemism, as Councillor Lee loves it, asset optimisation, I certainly think that perhaps as we head to 2018 LTP, that let's see the numbers as soon as possible around what sales, partial sales, potentially could deliver as far as proceeds for future intergenerational investment versus the forecast dividends. And I would like to think that we can put that out for real public consultation, and it needs to be done. It's well overdue as part of the LTP 2018, and let's see what the public thinks. And so I hope that your talk on page 6 of asset optimisation not only covers off the asset plan of selling 650 million over the next 10 years, but also the strategic assets, and particularly around the operational side of the likes of the ports of Auckland. You've nailed your colours to the mast as far as tolls go, and it was encouraging to hear that you've had and you seemingly have built up a good rapport with our relatively new Minister of Transport, Simon Bridges, and it would be really good when the Minister of Finance gets to his feet on the 21st of May in 3 weeks' time, almost exactly, to at least have a line in that budget, our monologue, that certainly suggests that they are meaningfully engaging with Auckland. They hear your call for the possibility of tolls, they've seen the surveys, and they are prepared to have a discussion and advance any proposition as best they can. It would certainly be good to get them on the record in that context come budget date. It would also, Mr Mayor, be great to get the government to commit to 50% of the CRL as soon as possible, not the 42% from 2020, but the entire works, not just the main works. I know that that was done for Auditor General requirements, a very prudent step in that, but as soon as we can get some government commitment on 50% of that $2.5 billion project, not 42%, the better that will be for ratepayers going forward. For me, I think it's all of what most of us have been saying in this budget round and in our workshops has been somewhat, all of us can see something that we've said and something that we've suggested. For me, I'm pleased that the Ngāti Whātua OPEX, to keep that fabulous whenua rangatira maintained, is not facing a 30% cut, and I know Ngāti Whātua will be pleased with that. It's under what would they have liked, but nonetheless it'll keep that whenua rangatira maintained to the standard that it deserves. I support the capping of the street trading fees for those enjoying alfresco dining, particularly the tiered structure where the further you go out from the CBD, effectively that you won't be paying as much for those than the higher pedestrian count businesses. I'm pleased that you haven't entertained the idea of charging our 47 or 8 business associations and bids and administration fee. I know that some were excited that could raise us $156,000, but as we've discussed as a group, it's probably not worth the fight, and so I acknowledge that that is not going to be a fight we're going to have with our business communities and town centres.